Hello, fellow traders, and welcome to the Advanced Dashboard Masterclass series. This is Hiran Amin, and today we're going to be looking at how to perform research on the Advanced Dashboard platform, specifically for equities. So let's get right into it and get going. All right, so once we're in our Advanced Dashboard platform, the first thing that I'd like to do when we get started is to get my platform set up with the tools that I need to begin my research. Now, for most traders, that might involve starting with a screener tool because we have certain criteria that we may want to look at. So let's go ahead and get that set up. Now, on my platform, you can notice that we have a tab, I've labeled it Scan, and I've gone ahead and added the screener tool here. Simply open up the plus sign, that's going to add a new workspace, and then you can go to the top where the categories are, and under Analysis, you can find the stock screener tool, which is what we've got loaded up here. Now, within the stock screener tool, of course, this allows a trader to really parse out the specific criteria that they want to be able to identify certain stocks. Now, on the stock screener tool first, in the first segment that you're going to see, or the first section at the top, we have some different filters you can specify for. So first, we have our markets. Do you want to look and scan in the universe of our Canadian stocks or the US markets? So you can make a selection within there. Along with that, once you've made a selection about the specific markets you're looking at, you can also specify the exchange on which you want to focus in on. So let's say, for example, we're going to look at the TSX exchange or the Toronto Stock Exchange and choose that. Next, you'll have the ability to filter for specific sectors as well within the market if you're looking. You can keep it broadly on all sectors, or you can specify individual ones if you're narrowing your search down there. Once you've finalized those, and we're going to focus on the energy space for our example here today, you're going to have a selection criteria. Now, keep in mind, Advanced Dashboard is meant for active traders who might be day trading, swing trading, and potentially even holding shorter term positions. So some of the criteria that you're going to find in the screener tool are going to be built based on that. Amongst some of these, the popular ones you're going to find under that category are some of the biggest gainers. So if we load that up for a moment, and we view the results, click on that, you'll notice, and we're just going to collapse the criteria menu for a second, you can see the most biggest gainers on the market. Now, within the results section here, of course, anything that you do see can be sorted along with those header columns where you see these little arrows, so we can sort it by price. So let's say we want to click on it and sort by descending or ascending. We can do that, and we can see it by a descending manner in the pricing. And we can do it by the gain as well. So if we want to see the largest gain today, we can sort it by that function as well. All right, so let's go and open up our criteria once again. So there are a number of different ones, as I mentioned over here. So there's the ones that are going to float towards the top are going to be related to your price action here. And then if you want to get more into the nitty-gritty of the financials of the company, we want to do fundamentals. And that's really what we're focusing on today. We're going to be looking at some of the dividends, ratios, and fundamental criteria that we have available. And let's set up a little small screen to be able to look at that. So under the dividends, I'm going to add dividend yield to begin with. And you can see once the criteria is added, you're able to then adjust those parameters for what you're looking for. So let's say on the minimum side, we were looking for at least 5% as our minimum yield. And on the top side, you are able to top any number that you like. Now for this one, I'm just going to leave it as the default that it has shown up there. So the second criteria we're going to be adding is our dividend growth rate as well as part of our screening. And this is going to be over a 5-year average that we're looking for. So once you add that in, we've already configured it to have a minimum of 5%. And based on the previous filter that we've already added, it's already giving us the maximum that's in that range there. So let's go and add some few other ones, and we can go ahead and add some under the fundamentals criteria as well. So within the fundamentals, of course, this is where you're going to really be able to pick out some of the values that you do see on financial statements that companies release. So for example, let's say we want to look for certain market capitalization on a company. It tells us how large or small of a company we want to screen for. When we are doing market capitalization, usually any companies that are considered to be over 2 billion in market capitalization are going to be sort of your mid to large cap and onwards, and your mega caps are over the 200 billion level. Now, the values that you do see in here are represented as millions, so we do want to put that at least at about, let's see if we can get the market caps and see if there's any results that are still populating, and there certainly are. And then within this criteria, going back, you do have a number of these other filters you can add, whether it be operating margin, gross profit, earnings per share, etc. So if you have followed the company closely, or you are very aware of how the numbers should look for a healthy company, then you can type those numbers in and go for that. Now, one of the things that we will do is within the fundamental section is perhaps we maybe want to add also the ratios. That's part of it. This really breaks down some of those numbers into ratios, which allows us to make more comparisons against like or peer companies. So out of the ratios here, the one that I would like to add is we can go ahead and add the PE ratio, of course. That's the price to earnings ratio, and keep that more in line. So I'm going to cap on the top side on this one, the PE. I'm going to limit it to about 50 over here if we can. There we go. All right. So now we're added a basic screening criteria over here. You are able to save this search as well for yourself and load it up based on this criteria. But let's pull up the results. You'll notice at the bottom here, we've got the view results here. So we can go ahead and populate that. Now, once you populate that, let's minimize the criteria over here so we can actually view the results that we've just seen. So again, you still have the sorting function available to you, and the sorting function is, it's going to be marked by these little arrows next to the headers that we have, so we can sort by either the price, the dividend yield, and of course, any of the criteria that we have selected. So let's go ahead and do it by market capitalization to start with here, and we're going to set it in a descending manner, and we can see which is largest market capitalization and going down from there. Once you have this, as mentioned previously, we can just populate our criteria again. We do have the ability to save the screen that we just ran. So we can hit save, and we can just say, we'll just call this here in screen. You can label it whatever you'd like there, and just hit create. And so the next time around that you do pull up your stock screener, you can access those save screens from right over here, and we can switch easily between the two that you have. So if we go to here in screen, you can see the exact criteria that I loaded up and just pull up the results in with one click of a button from there. All right. So this is a quick look at our screener tool. Now, what we're going to move on to now is you probably want to do a little bit more detailed analysis on some of the picks that are being presented to you through the screener tool. So what we're going to do next is we're going to look at the earnings of the company, and we're going to look at the profile of the company, and we're going to peer into a bit more of that. Now, once you've populated results, you might want to also peer more into the details about that company, and to do that, we can use the Equity Analytics tool. Now, one way you can access that is you'll notice beside each of the tickers that we have, there's a menu. And for example, if we go next to ENB and click on that menu, we're first brought up with the order entry options that we have. And second, at the very bottom, it gives you a choice to open the symbol in various trading widgets. The one that we're concerned about today is the Equity Analytics. So just to give you an example how that will look, if we click on that, it's going to open up its own window within the same workspace that we have, which is called Scan. And now we can peer into some of the more minutiae details of the company. But there is another way that I can show us so that if you want to build a custom workspace for yourself, how to do that. So let's go ahead and close this for a second. Now, what I've done with my stock screener is I've opened up the link settings. So if we click on this top left menu with the bars, and if you open it up, you can see that we've checked off channel 1, which is the blue color, and it's going to give us the send option. Now, on this workspace, which we've created, which is called research, I've gone ahead and added the Equity Analytics tool over here. Now, within the Equity Analytics, we're still going to get to the same spot, which is this bar, the sync settings, and we can then choose to turn on or check off the receive box. Now, what this does is that any scan results that I have, so let's pull up those scan results again here, minimize our criteria, and if I simply click on it, it will load up into that specific area for me now. All right. So that's one thing you can do that's going to make a little bit of that research more efficient from not having to type in that symbol each time. All right, let's go into Equity Analytics now. We were looking at Enbridge. We've got it loaded up in our Equity Analytics tool. Now, there's quite a bit we can actually peer through on this company within this tool. First, you're going to be brought to the company profile. Now, chances are if you're researching a company, you may want to know a little bit about just the basics of what the company does. And this is a spot where you're going to be able to find some of that information. So first, what you're going to find on this section, you can see we're on the Equity Analytics tool and we're on the company profile over here. You're going to find the ticker of the company, the full name of the company, the current price, what currency it currently trades in, and what exchange or market it's also trading in there. Apart from that, there's some basic information, how many shares outstanding the company has, the market capitalization currently, and the free float percentage that's available there, the size of the company in terms of its employees and its headquartered address. And then they have some more technical information related to the actual security itself on the market, some clearing information there, and then its quarterly figures, usually when you can expect its earnings announcements to come, and they usually are going to be pretty standard format across the board. So if you're wondering what is the next earnings that's going to come up for 2024, we already do see there's a quarterly figure that's coming up not too far away. And the next one will be in May, and then they usually have the next round after that in August there. Aside from that, over to the left-hand side, this is where you're going to find a little blurb about what the company in fact does. How does it make money essentially? What industry it's in, what sector it's part of. So this is where you're going to find some of that information. Along with that, you're going to have some information about who the management is that's running this company. So once you've looked at the company profile, what you can go to next is the next tab over is going to be the analyst evaluation. Now, to take everyone through this, what you're seeing is just a basic information. First of all, it's going to tell us a couple of things at the top. It's going to give us this recommendation, which is sitting at a 2.5. So what does a 2.5 in fact mean when you're looking at this? Well, what it is doing is you can see there's a scale at the bottom. And the way that it scales it is that if we scroll down here, the strong buy is rated as a 1, buy is just a number 2, hold is a 3, etc. Now, out of the total analysts that are being polled, and you can see over here, there's a total of 22 analysts currently. And there's two out of the 22 that have it as a strong buy. There's 10 of them that have it as just a buy. There's 8 of them on the hold pattern, and then there's just 1 that has a sell. So they basically average out these scores of the number of analysts where they're sitting, and they produce this recommendation of 2.5. That tells us it's kind of in that buy to almost buy to hold range on average there by most analysts. The next thing you're going to see at the top here, of course, that's going to be the target price. That's the consensus among the analysts, or the street, as we like to call it. And it's telling us, well, what's the difference to the current price? Well, how far away is the target price from the current state? And so there's still potentially a 10% upside if it does reach this target price there. All right. Below that, on the assessment side of things, you can see how those assessments have changed. You can see a gauge of the colors with the buys and the holds. And so currently we are seeing in 2023, if we look at some of the previous quarter there, in the fourth quarter, there was 8 holds, 2 buys. This upcoming quarter, that hasn't changed a whole lot, the outlook, or actually the price changes is what this tracks. And that hasn't changed a whole lot going forward into projecting what the future targets are looking like there. So this is a basic summary screen, just giving you a sense of where the price is and what the Wall Street analysts are, or in this case, the Bay Street analysts are thinking of the stock there. Now, if we move on to the next one, this is where we can actually look at those hard numbers on a company, the financial statements. Now, this is a condensed version that you're going to see over here. If you do want to see the full list, you can visit the company's website and pull up those full detailed financial statements. So this page is broken down amongst the 3 core financial statements that all publicly traded companies have to produce. We have, of course, the balance sheet in this section. In this highlighted section, we have let's go down to the bottom here, the profit and loss statement, also commonly known as the income statement. And then further below that, we have the cash flow statement, giving us a summary. So within here, what you're seeing or what you're tracking is on an annual basis. They're giving out these numbers and using US GAAP accounting principles. So you'll see a basic summary of a lot of these numbers, the total assets the company has, and mainly it's to look for those changes year over year if you're wanting to get a sense of the trend of how those numbers are either on the decline or on the incline there. Right, so from here, what you can do is we can further go into looking at the ratios now along with some of these numbers. Sometimes it's a bit hard to digest what they all mean unless you can level set it with the industry, the sector, or some of its peers. And this is going to help us do that by looking at these ratios. So within the ratios, there's charts, and you can configure these charts according to these different sections. So there's an earnings section over here. And right now we're charting for the earnings per share or EPS number that's coming up. You can select any of these other ones. Let's say we want to chart for the earnings yield. We can do a graph on that. And it also does present us those annualized numbers for each of these categories. So simply selecting the radio button within these categories that's available to you will change the chart in whichever information that you are looking for at that current time there. So once you've kind of looked at the financials, you've got a good sense of the estimates and ratios that we have over here. What we can also do is just to get a sense a bit maybe of the risk profile of the security. So we can go to relative performance, and what this is going to show us is it's going to benchmark a couple of things for us. First of all, the first thing is performance itself. It's going to tell us in this sort of section over here, these three columns, and it's all broken down by a week, a month, and a yearly basis, how it stacks up against some of the major indexes that it's maybe part of. So we have the Dow Jones Titans Energy Index, for example, the S&P Composite, the S&P TSX 60, which is comprised of. So is it really lagging the index, or is it keeping up or outperforming that index on these different time frames? Along with the relative performance that we have, we also have the correlation as well. So correlation really simply states how closely it is following certain markets or indexes there in terms of its movements there. And so you can see the lower the numbers are, the less correlated it becomes. A perfect correlation with a specific index will be usually a value of 1. Now, beside that, the final one is the beta. And this is seen as a sign of volatility for a lot of traders. They usually track beta to see how volatile it is in respect to a certain index. And in this case, you can really benchmark it against any broad market index or a specific sector index that you'd like to see. So we can see if we look at the DJ Titans Energy, the beta value is almost very minimal, where the volatility is far less compared to what Enbridge's volatility is. So the lower the number, the less you could consider that as being less volatile than the index itself there. Right. So that was just a look at the relative performance here. Now, the last thing that we'll look at on this page is we're going to look at the dividends and capital changes. So again, this is going to be for those who are income seekers. If you really want to find those income streams and how much they're currently paying, or even tracking over time how much they've grown those dividends as well, this is a spot you can do that. So you can go back in history over here, and it goes as far down as, well, it goes back into the 80s. In fact, you can see Enbridge started in the early 90s back at 50 cents a share, and then moving up to what we have today. In today's, the most current dividend amount for this year is 91.5 cents a share a quarter. That's what it's doing. Also along here, you're going to be presented with the ex-dividend date. This is important, especially if you're looking to enter into a position. This is a key date for traders, as this is when the stock no longer trades with the dividend. So if you do want to get paid that dividend and looking to buy that stock, you usually want to buy the stock a day before this date that you see presented to you over here. So that's a little bit about the dividend and capital changes. So we've had a look at some of the high-level information about the company, what it does under the company profile page. We went into that analyst evaluation to see, just to get a sense of what the professionals are saying, or where their targets are with the company and what it's aligned with in its pipeline maybe for the future projected growth. And then we looked at some of those hard numbers that have been coming through with the financials in terms of its sales, its profit, its assets, liabilities that it has through these various statements that we have. Now, what remains is maybe we want to look ahead and find out, well, how has the earnings been, and is there a way I can actually graph or look at some of those earnings? So what we're going to look at next is, first of all, when to see those earnings when they're coming up, and also being able to track those earnings. So let's go on to do that using our earnings analyzer, and we're also going to bring up our calendar tool as well. All right. So now we're going to look at the earnings specifically. We want to be able to graph or chart the earnings, see how the past performance is done, see maybe potentially what's coming up in the future projected earnings there. So how do we do that? Now, first thing we're going to do is in fact find out when those earnings are. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm actually going to build a new layout. When we're going to click this plus sign over here, and I'm just going to use the desktop as my chosen view. And I'm just going to call this calendar for what it is. So let's go ahead and type that in. You can label it whatever you like, and we're going to click on Add Layout. So within this new space, what we're going to do is just create a single view where we can see our earnings calendar. So the earnings calendar is going to be found under our News and Markets category. So under the News and Market category, we're going to head over to Earnings Calendar. Now this is your one-stop shop really to either find something from your watch list. If you want to look at it from an entire market standpoint, you can look at it that way as well. So right now you can see, and what we're going to do is just enlarge the space over here and maximize the screen that we're using. You can see right now in the symbol search box, we've got our Canadian market loaded up here and the United States market loaded up as well. You can see it's quite busy. So let's get rid of the United States market for a second. And once we do that, what we can do is we can parse out and see just on our Canadian equities what we have. So you can see we can move through different months or weeks, whichever one respectively we'd like to look at. And you'll see just a list of what's coming up. So let's just say on the previous day, we could see all the earnings that came out on the Canadian market over here. And also, if we scroll across from this information, it tells us the estimate of what those numbers were. And it gives us comparisons as well based on the last quarter, the previous year as well, along with the what quarter the earnings is for in the actual company's physical year. So pretty easy to navigate from that standpoint. Now, what you can do as well, you also have the ability to look at it specifically for your own custom watch list. So we can come in within here, and for example, you can see we have a number of different watch lists that we've created over here. Let's say I load up my auto manufacturer's watch list. Now, one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of Canada for a second. And what we want to do is look on a monthly view and look at it on a larger scale. Now, there's obviously nothing coming up for this month. We can look at it for a future one and see if there is. And maybe I'm going to type in the United States over here and leave that market. There we go. A lot of those auto manufacturers are US companies. And now you can see a lot of those coming up for the entire month that's been selected. Now, you can look at individually by clicking the date as well. But we're looking at a full month view, and this is giving us a record of pretty much all of them that are due to release their earnings soon, and also when those earnings are going to come up there. Now, once we have that, let's say I want to look at a particular one. Let's go back to our research tool. Let's see how we can find some of that earnings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up this new tool. Now, I've already added in part of my research workspace, and this one is called Earnings Analyzer. So Earnings Analyzer allows us to track these EPS numbers, earnings per share numbers. It also allows us to see what the estimates have come in at and what the actual has benchmarked against those estimates when those earnings have been reported. So just to show everyone what we're looking at, so you're seeing this chart at the bottom. You're looking across different quarters over here that is being charted for. So this orange line that we have here, these are the actual numbers. Now, if you land on one of them, you can see that it does show you what those numbers are going to be as you scroll through them. And this blue line with this box within it, this is the estimate numbers, and the two bars below and above it show us the low and high values of the analyst on what the actual EPS is. So you can see if we hover over this for a second, there we go. It gives us that full information on what the actual EPS came in at, what the estimates were, and how much the high-low range was as well. So this really helps us see when the earnings had a beat or they had an earnings miss come through. And along with that at the top, we're able to see how the price reacted as well when those earnings came out. So on this time frame, you can choose essentially whatever time scale you want to look at. We're currently clued into the 3-year window, and we're looking on a weekly basis. If we switch it to a monthly, we can switch it on a monthly calendar as well and see how the price performed on a monthly basis at the end of that earnings period there when it showed. Now, One thing you can also check off on this earnings analyzer is show future estimates. And so this will kind of jump into the future and show some of what the next estimates are going to be and graph it here for us. So we're able to do that. Now, you can also just choose your own specific one. So let's just say we want to look at Apple. It's a business that's well known to many of us, and the way that they operate, their operating model there. Some other information you're going to see is the next earnings summary that's presented to us over here. So the current price of the stock, when the next earnings is going to come out, what the consensus estimate is going to be for the quarter. And you can see it's sitting at currently at $2 and let's call it, round it up, $2.10 there with a buy recommendation. Now, the other information that's also very useful for traders, especially if they're trading this, is implied volatility. This gives us a sense of what the future expected pricing variability is going to be on Apple, expressed as a percentage, and there's a gauge to it. We can see that in Apple's case, they've had implied volatility as low as 16%, and it's been high as 50% over the 52-week range, and currently it sits at about 25, which is on that lower end of that scale there. So traders would want to pay attention to this, especially for various strategies that they may have, maybe just beyond just trading stocks on there. Along with that, there's a lot of unpredictability that happens when earnings are released. So traders might want to find out what are the probability or standard deviations from the current price in which the price could jump to. So this first standard deviation, which is a measure of the 68% probability, gives us a price range over here, and it's showing us 185 to a 202 range. And if we go up to 2 standard deviation, that expands the range down to 176 on the downside and 211 on the top side there. So this can help a trader really set up their positions well to really see if there is a big miss or there's a big beat, we could see some big price action or price jumps happening over here. And that's a look at the research tools on the Advanced Dashboard platform for equities. Thank you for joining me. Please be sure to check out the rest of the videos as part of the Advanced Dashboard Masterclass series.